European time, and I believe 11:35 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we are ready to rock. So hi, everyone. 45 of you. Yay. Welcome to the panel on leadership at the intersection of business and open source. We'll be discussing leadership across traditional and open source organizations, what leadership means to us, and how we see the values, opportunities, and challenges in leadership and open source. While the panel is happening, please feel free to add your questions and comments in the session chat, actually the session Q&A. And then towards the end, we're going to leave 10 minutes at the end of the session to answer as many of the posted questions as possible. So hopefully a lot of you contribute your questions there. And so diving right in, to kick things off, we're going to each introduce ourselves and then we'll get straight into the questions. So my name is Tracy Evans. Hello, I'm your host today. I am a strategist and a founding partner at Open Strategy Partners. We are a strategic communications company for technology organizations, and we have a special place in our hearts for open source. A lot of our customers are open source tools or agencies. And I'm passionate about leadership, spreadsheets, and Post-its. Can't live without those. And the most important attribute of leadership to me is the support and enablement of others. So I'm going to pass the torch over to Addie to introduce yourself.
Cool. Hi, I'm Addison Berry. I'm the CEO for OCO Labs. We're much better known for our online Drupal training site, Drupalize Me. But we do have other things, irons in the fire, that we deal with. We used to be part of Lullabot and split off from them about 5 years ago. But so I started with Lullabot almost 15 years ago as a developer and consultant, and then worked my way into the leadership role at Lullabot, and then became the CEO when we did split the company off. And in terms of open source, I was involved with open source before going to work for Lullabot. So it's been over 15 years for me using and contributing. And, OCO Labs, like the name OCO stands for open source inside and out. So we're pretty dedicated to open source as a business. For me, I'm pretty passionate sort of like in life generally about empowering people by making sure that they have access to the right sort of tools and knowledge that they need to succeed. Like that's sort of a larger vision of my own personal. And then I feel like within leadership, that ends up sort of being on point for me in terms of what I think is important, and really letting other people shine and succeed.
Cool. Thanks for that. Lisa, how about you go next?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Taliaferro. I'm Director of Developer Education at SourceGraph. SourceGraph is a tool to help developers search all of their code. My background is partially in startups and partially in university research. So a lot of my open source contributions have been in the digital humanities field of research. And like others have mentioned, I also am really, I really think it's important to empower others in leadership and to support more people becoming stakeholders and owners of technical work.
Thank you. Steffi, you're up.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, everybody. My name is Stephanie Langner. People know me as Steffi. I'm from Hamburg, Germany. I'm CXO and co-founder of Lean Koala and Quality. And as probably you hear from the name, we're taking care of quality themes. So we do website monitoring solutions, partly known in the German-speaking area. I'm in and around the web for like 10 years now. My heart beats for bringing more diversity to the table in technology and business. That's why I additionally chose to support the International Geek Cats Association together with Lisa as an ambassador in Germany. And actually, I'm growing my leadership skills on the way through our startup. So, and this is really a roller coaster ride for me. And but I always focus on enabling, encouraging, and openness is a really big thing for me. Contributing to open source probably is we're using for our products a lot of open source, and also have plugins open source, and encourage our people to share their experiences and contribute to open source technologies. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone, for your introductions. All right, diving right in to the first question here. We're going to cover some basics. So leadership means different things to different people, cultures, and organizations. Addie, I'm going to put you on the spot for the first one. What differences do you see between traditional business leadership and leadership in open source? You're muted.
Aha. I've been, I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate. I haven't really worked in traditional business. I worked in government before I got into the open source world and where I work now, which is similar in a lot of ways, I think, albeit different. Anyway, for me, the biggest difference in terms of leadership that I've found within open source communities themselves and open source businesses based on open source is mostly listening to people and having people more involved, less hierarchical and more group work together kinds of activity. That was sort of like the biggest shift and most appealing shift for me personally, I think, when I started looking at leadership and how do things actually get done, because you have less of this hierarchical control from the top.
Yeah, definitely. Lisa, how would you define leadership in open source? And I'm assuming, given your experience, if you also wanted to add a little bit to what Addie was talking about in terms of the difference between traditional leadership and open source leadership, that would also be great. Throw two questions at you at once.
Sure. Yeah, like Addie, I think that it benefits from like a distributed model of leadership where there's lots of opportunities for community-led work. And I think that this could also be pretty effective in a business or maybe in a research setting is what I'm thinking of, where more folks are working together with clear ownership and a common goal. I think, yeah, there's different benefits for hierarchical versus more of a distributed model. And I think that maintainers are some of the undersung heroes of open source for sure. But the great maintainers are those who are really working to bring more folks in as co-leaders.
Excellent, thank you. Steffi, moving over to you now. What do you see as the different types of leadership in open source, and how do the roles differ?
I'd say like open source, I think people in open source communities and working on open source project are highly motivated. So from the intern. So I think that's a really high aspect to rank. And I think that's really worth bringing also to traditional businesses. So I think everybody who's running a traditional business can just hope to have people that highly motivated to contribute, to do things in their free time, to evolve, so they are more passionate about it. And I think that's really an important thing we need to encourage. And I think a lot of, especially in the modern software development, are getting into that traditional business there as well.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Addie, back to you. So since the inception of your company in 2010, like you mentioned, first as Lullabot and now as OCO Labs, open source use, participation, and contribution has played a central role in your identity and strategy. So as the CEO, can you share with us what the business case behind this choice was, and how it plays out operationally, and if there's any specific challenges you want to share with us? I can repeat any of that if you need to.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I guess like the business case behind, choosing open source sort of as our touchstone, we came from Lullabot, so that all started with Matt and Jeff, who are the founders of Lullabot, and they, their decisions for how they structured Lullabot, and then we've carried that forward. And their initial thing was they were two people working on open source, and they wanted to see this grow, and they wanted to see this be successful. And business ended up being sort of a means to an end in that regard, right? So like open source was the goal, and creating a business to help sustain that was a means to that end. And I think, we still carry a lot of that forward in OCO Labs as we've evolved. At the end of the day, we all just really want to be part of this like kind of world changing, really cool, empowering idea. And we still want to pay our bills. So we're like, how do we do that? So I mean, like in terms of like the initial decision for that coupling of those two things together, that's where it all sort of originally comes from. In terms of what that means in terms of our company operationally, there are also just a lot of advantages that we get by being sort of deeply involved, contributing and giving back. Like, there's we spend time and we spend money, and it's very much an investment that we get a return on, just like any other investment that we do, right? And so, for instance, we didn't have to even work at marketing. Like we were sitting in the middle of our target audience from the very beginning. Our customers just come to us. We're all inbound sales, right? So it's like that is huge, especially for starting a company. But then other things like the way that we do content in particular, actually, this is actually part of our business model, is where we contribute for foundational and basic learning materials for things. And we give that to the community. We volunteer our time. We spend money where that's needed. And then that gives us this introductory material that the community is supporting. We're not responsible for taking care of that. We're a company of 5 people. Like we have to prioritize our time and our work. Now we can get the community involved in helping care and take care of this really important content. But then that lets us focus as a business on the more intermediate and advanced content. And that's the stuff that people are more willing to pay for. So like in terms of just a pure business decision, it's a very supportive sort of symbiotic relationship that we end up with.
Excellent. And the challenges.
Challenges. There are challenges. I would say the biggest challenge is that the open source tools and communities have very different processes and timelines for getting things done. And so when you are running a business that is sort of intimately linked with open source, you have to learn to navigate that. And if you're not familiar with navigating that and sort of figuring out how to prioritize that properly within your business, that can be extremely frustrating and bewildering and just annoying, right? I'll be honest, even knowing those things, it can be very frustrating at times when you're like, trying to make dependencies and work things together and figure out your priorities can be really difficult. And I think so if we weren't so involved and sort of setting our foundation on open source project, that would move and shift in really different ways. So it's a challenge. Having come from the community, instead of trying to put ourselves on top of it from the outside, though, I think gave us a lot of advantages for learning to navigate that and understanding how that should fit into our business priorities or not.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. Thank you. That was really insightful. Jumping down into our next theme, leading people in open source business. So I believe that, as I mentioned before, enabling others to do and to shine is one of the most important elements of all leadership across traditional business or open source. And I'm going to put the first question on this topic to Lisa. How do we inspire, motivate, and energize people in traditional business versus open source business / community?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think the two share in common are just having a clear vision for the work you're doing and a clear mission. I think open source really can rally around like a clear mission. And I think that resonates really well in business as well. And that's something that maybe could carry over. Like, for example, the reason why I'm at SourceGraph today is because of the long-term vision to enable more folks to be involved in technology, to learn programming. And this is what really encouraged me to join. And I think with open source, there's a similar way of creating like this kind of rallying cry and something to organize and develop a community around. I think one thing that open source can do better is supporting more underrepresented folks in open source communities. And sometimes that might have some, more financial or material motivation involved as well. And I think that's something that we could do better in open source for sure.
Excellent. Yeah, great. Thank you. Steffi, what sort of things do you do to enable others on your team or in the communities like the Geekettes that you're involved in? And can you give us some specific examples?
Sure. Yeah, we always encourage our team members like to go on conferences or to join meetups. We do a lot of meetups around, and especially in these times, like today, it's perfect. You can go all around the world to see meetups, to contribute, and to get new information and also represent yourself and what you're doing. So we encourage people right from the beginning in every kind of business they are working for us, not only in the development, also in marketing, just to go out there and show like little cases, what you're doing, and you get a lot of feedback. And that's like, I think that the open knowledge and community aspect. So you get feedback, you learn on the road how to, what you can do better, because you learn how to articulate yourself better. Even so am I. And I think you get a lot of reward and you're growing on the way. So I think that's really, really important. What we also do is, that's kind of thing we do at the Geekettes too, is like we propose each other as speakers. So a lot of people are too shy to go out there. And so I see a lot of them need like a push. So I asked them, hey, I saw there's a call for papers. I think that's perfect for you. You should go there. And when they are not, when they're too shy to do it themselves, I say, okay, let's do it as a duo. So you have some senior and some junior doing it together, or writing articles or blog posts or whatever, but go out there, try to learn, and you can see how they evolve, and they are getting better and they're liking it. And I think that's really a big thing.
Oh, fantastic. I love that idea of, pairing off with people to do presentations. I know that certainly helped me at the beginning with my business partner. I'd just like join up with him, who's like born to be on stage, and, just to get my footing and my grounding. So I think that's an excellent idea of how we can encourage and enable others to get on stage, literally and figuratively. Addie, moving on to you. An important component of leadership is creating an organization of emotional safety that allows different perspectives to be shared and explored. as a leader, how do you create an emotionally safe environment for people to thrive and to grow in?
Yeah, this is a big one. So thanks. Like one of our values, and I think sort of foundational to this question, is building trust. And part of building trust is, being vulnerable and creating a space for that. And I mean, at the end of the day, in order to get trust, you have to give trust. And so you have to put yourself out there, and you have to create a space there where people feel safe. And but this to me, it gets very, I think in a lot of ways it sounds really simple to be like, be vulnerable, be open, be transparent, share your information, and then people will just come and be safe. And it's not that simple. Like, it's relatively simple maybe conceptually, but it's not easy to do. And I feel like there is a big balance between inspiration, or a fine line between inspiration and intimidation. And like as companies, as a business, right, we're in the world of growth. That may not mean, growing millions of dollars or growing your team, but even just like personal and professional growth within your team members, like encouraging them, like we were just talking about, like how do you encourage them to go do things and grow and learn new things and be what they can be? How do we do this thing about empowering people, right? We want to empower people. So like, let's go. It's super exciting. But that can also be super scary and super intimidating for a lot of people, especially people who are not traditionally allowed in those spaces, right? Or encouraged to be in those spaces. And so I guess I'll say there is a fine line, and I don't want to like oversimplify it, because it's constant work. You don't just like show up and be vulnerable one day, or like share like why I need to be out of the office to make other people feel safe about saying why they need to be out of the office or whatever. Like, it's constant work, and it's this sort of safe environment that you need to create so that you can get that creativity and stuff going. It's changing, it's moving, it's shifting, it's always evolving, and you've got to always be listening. You've got to always be holding the space. It's really easy for that to sort of crunch in here and crunch in there. And it's going to change for each individual. What I feel safe with, or what creates a safe environment for me, is very different than it is for the other people on my team, for a variety of reasons. And so again, it's my job as a leader to really listen and try to pay attention and own my own failures in that space, and try to keep moving forward and try to keep the conversation on the table and not set it, just sort of set it and forget it, because it's never going to work that way. It's a constant effort and constantly talking about it.
Yeah, definitely. This next question I have for Steffi, I have a little bit of context and background before I jump right into the question. So bear with me. So management consultant Peter Drucker famously said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I think that we can see this being lived out in a lot of open source communities. For example, Drupal thrived without a concrete roadmap for years. Some people would say it could do that because the Drupal community has a strong culture. In another open source community and in the Type 3 community, they have a culture of funding, many kinds of contributions that come from a deep belief in equality and enablement. So getting down to the specific question for you, how do you believe values and culture play a stronger or a different role in open source than in traditional business?
Oh, that's a tough one. But yeah, I think it comes back to the theme of motivation and working together on something. So I think in traditional business, you often have the type of hierarchy. So you have that from top to bottom, and the decisions are made, visions are set. So you can't work on them. You just see them. Okay, that's our goal. We have to go there, and they say, "Tell me what to do." I think that evolved in the last couple of years, also for traditional businesses. So talking about OKRs, agile methods, it comes from the bottom. You have the vision, but everybody sees how they can put their step into this. So I think and there you have it again, the internal motivation to do things. And while you're doing, you can see that you can move things, which makes you even more satisfied with your work. And I think that's really, really important. And to motivate people to do this, and also people, you said it, Addison, people are different. Not everybody is open to say, okay, I want to go for it. I am highly motivated. You have to see everybody as they are and help them if they are not as their parents. So you have to see who's going there, who needs a little more support, who needs to be teamed up. And there you can you have to do some more individual work. And as a leader, you have to see people. You have to have even more feedback. You not only have the top-down feedback, you need 360 feedbacks. You need the feedback for a team leader from his employees, also as from the top. And I think that's really, really important. And I think when it comes back to communities and open source and projects where you have a lot of people coming in from all the sides, you have that kind of the same results where how people bring on things, though they aren't set how to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Thank you for that. Moving on to the next question, talking about leadership and society. So values in business culture are evolving. Openness, transparency, and collaboration seem to be leading to a shift in business models. The military-inspired world of threats and competitors under every rock feels really outdated to me, but it was definitely a huge part of my studies when I studied business management. There's so many military metaphors in business strategy books. So transparency, collaboration, and contribution feel like a more sustainable way forward. So there's a set of questions for both Lisa and Addie. I see both of your companies list open and transparent as values in your publicly available company handbooks, alongside things like your principles, strategies, and processes. And what I'd like to know from each of you is, what are the upsides of operating as open and transparent by default? What are the downsides naturally? And do you see this as a trend in other companies as well? I'll put Addie on the spot first.
So in terms of like upsides, speaking personally as a CEO, I get a lot more help trying to run the company. Awesome. It's like the feedback that you're getting is really useful, and there's no reason to not have that feedback. Like for me, it's amazing. I have all these really smart people. Why wouldn't I have them be part of all of the conversations and decisions that are going on? And related directly to that, there's also, buy-in. I mean, if I'm part of making a decision, or I'm part of just a process of understanding what's going on, then my buy-in to what we're trying to do and where we're going is going to be a lot stronger or a lot more clear, right? Instead of somebody telling me, back to military stuff, these are your marching orders, go, right? So that's probably the biggest advantage. I think there are a lot of advantages out there. I think the biggest downside, at least that we've encountered, is that it can just be super overwhelming, because we're open and transparent about pretty much everything except for HR issues that need to be kept private. But everything else, financially, strategy wise, everything else is out there. And I want my team to be involved as much as they want to be involved, but trying to find that line of I want to be involved, but I'm also like actually trying to produce our product right now. Can you just like not talk to me about this? We've spent a bunch of time trying to like ride those rapids and figure out where it makes sense and where we can kind of come out with, here's all the information. Here's a summary of some information for you that you may not be interested in. And if you're interested in more, let me know. And we've sort of learned to navigate, I think, as a team a lot better with that. But it has definitely been a little bit troublesome at times.
Excellent. And you see this trend in other companies as well, in the circles that you travel in?
I think, I sort of. I feel like a lot of companies like the idea of it, but they get really scared about the implementation of it, particularly when it comes to finances or actually involving the team in actual strategic decisions. They feel like I'm like losing control, or financially, if things aren't going well, you're like, oh, am I going to scare everybody on my team? But this past year has been what it was. And, and sharing the financials with my team every single month and us explaining what was happening, what the effect was, what we were doing. Everybody got on board with like, what do we need to do to ride through this as a team? Right. And it was amazing. Like it wasn't our best financial year, but it was one of the most amazing years for me as a CEO. And so it's sort of, I understand the hesitancy and the reservations that people have with sharing that kind of information. But part of it is how you share that information and what you're trying to do with it. And just recognizing the benefits that you can really gain from it.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Oh, fantastic. What a great story. Lisa, I'm going to turn over the same questions over to you. So what are the upsides of operating open and transparent, and the downsides, and whether you see this as a trend in other companies?
Yeah, I think similar to Addie, I see a lot of opportunities for co-ownership of work, and as well, like kind of like a lot of knowledge sharing sometimes produces too much cognitive load. So trying to surface the things that are most important and being able to have enough context to move forward is, I think, the tricky balance. I think something else that is tricky is just setting those expectations and making sure that everybody across like a growing organization is aware of like how transparent things are, what is out in the open, what are things that are publicly available, what are things that are available to the whole company, or what are only available at the team level. I think that there's lots of good that could come from kind of learning in public and putting everything out there and kind of letting people know where you are and where you're going. But there's also a certain level of risk. So making it clear also publicly that there's going to be like iteration, there's going to be kind of once we learn something new, there might be a pivot. And I think that's important too. I think there is, like, especially among like startups, I think this is very like becoming increasingly common. I know like GitLab is one of the kind of famous, really open and transparent companies. And I think a lot of different companies kind of aspire to that. And there's always going to be like a back and forth as people come in from different industries into like kind of like a more open source tech space and kind of negotiating what's transparent and what is a little more private.
Definitely. Definitely. Great. Thank you for that. Really great insights. Open source means more than just a freely available code base nowadays. It's expanded its sphere of influence operationally. Lots of organizations use it, but also on other levels, like being open and transparent. The next question is for Steffi. You and Lean Koala are actively engaged in what you call open knowledge. Can you tell us more about that and why it's important? And how are you participating and contributing to open knowledge?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can say, well, open knowledge, I would say one on the side, on the intern side and on the extern side. So one, of course, in the intern side is, of course, as you already mentioned, Ellie and Lisa, it's not only KPIs. So I think it's really important to share information, also maybe sensible information that might hurt with team members, to show them which path we're going. The last year was a roller coaster, I think, for everybody. And you have to share good and bad, I think. So you have to share success, you have to share good KPIs, but you can also show, okay, we're not as good as we wanted to be on here, and as the revenues are not as expected, we can't do this. So you have to bring everything in context. And of course, it's a fine line, because you don't want to scare people. Sometimes people are scared or overloaded with information. So you have to have a really fine line how to communicate and what to communicate, and not everything all the time. So I think that's really important. And also we need our team members to show what they're doing. Like, okay, when there's a new when we launch something new, and I want the developers to show everybody just like 5 minutes, just to show what you're doing, so everybody else get those buzzwords that they are always talking about, and also the other from the marketing side. So show your buzzwords, bring them in context, and just do 5 minutes lightning talk or something. So I think that's really important on the intern side, but not to do it too much, but get everybody on board. And I think that's a really good thing of open knowledge for on the intern side. On the extern side, I always like to say it, for me, it is like business grammar. So I think when you go out there and share things, good as bad, and encourage people, it comes back to you. So we are sharing a lot of our stories, like good or bad, like things they work really, really well, but also like went like little fuck ups. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this.
I guess so.
But I think you gotta be honest. And only this, I think you gotta be honest and real, and then people trust you. And that's internally and externally. And that's why I encourage a lot into the startup world. Like, I'm packed with work, but still this encourages me and gives me back so much to help others and get back. And that's on the startup scene, on technical themes. And yeah, I think
excellent.
It's worth it.
Great. So one more question on that topic before we check in the Q&A if anybody has questions for us. So the last question is for you, Lisa. You also have a strong foothold in this concept of open knowledge with your open access book and the contributions that you've made to educational open source projects. Can you tell us more about those and the connection those contributions have to leadership in open source?
Sure. Yeah, I think coming from kind of an academic research teaching background, I really value open access, open source, open knowledge. And I think this kind of work, I think, is more empowering like the next generation of folks to become leaders in places like open source and technology. And trying to things like creating educational open source repos and kind of teaching people how to be an open source contributor that's reads the docs before contributing, that kind of understands that there's going to be a back and forth on a pull request, and just kind of trying to set expectations around like a bi-directional value of each other, and like kind of shared community there, I think is what I'm trying to do in that work. And like what Addie had mentioned, just giving folks learning materials to kind of set them up for success, I think is important, and kind of how we're going to keep the torch going with ongoing leadership.
Excellent. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. That's the first part of our panel today with the questions that we prepared in advance. I'm going to click over to our Q&A section and see what kind of questions we have here for us. So the first one I see is from Sharon Clapp. Question of economics. Should small organizations choose open source versus proprietary tools, or might we admit that some organizations don't have bandwidth for this? Plus, building open source skills may be costlier than licensing. So who would like to tackle that first question out of the team? Do I have any volunteers?
I got opinions.
Great. Let's hear it.
I mean, yeah, definitely. Like, I feel like I'm not an open source purist. For me, it's using the tool that you have with the resources that you have. You know, like, I mean, our business is built on an open source product or products, in the sense of our business model is built on that, but the way we run our business is not built on open source. Some of it is, some of it is not. It's all about what is the best tool for the efficiency of my team given our parameters now. And we've changed our tooling over the years. We are constantly reevaluating all of our tools and processes on an ongoing basis, and everything's sort of in the pot. So yeah, I feel like in terms of the actual infrastructure for your business, whether it's open source or proprietary, I mean, that is for us, and this is just our business, that's just sort of a business decision that we make. Of course, we'd love to use open source tools when we can and support open source projects when that makes the most sense. But if there's a big disparity in our options, then we don't force the issue at all. So that's where we've come down on it, particularly with small businesses. You got to work with what you got.
Yeah, really. Excellent. Thank you for that, Addie. Another question. Oh, I should have approached these in a different order. The earliest question was from Anonymous. How would you approach a CEO that sees no gains or interest in giving back to Drupal? We would love to have time to contribute and submit patches, etc., but he doesn't see the need. Do you have any advice?
Yeah, you need to make the business case for it, and that depends on your business. Honestly, there's a lot of information out there on how to sell contribution to your boss. There's tons of resources. I'm sure there are probably resources at DrupalCon, this DrupalCon. If not, I know that Tracy can hook you up with a lot of that stuff.
My business partner did a couple of presentations on that exact topic at DrupalCons in the past. So find me somehow and I will share that presentation link, or I will just post it on Twitter later and Anonymous can find it there. Cool, thank you for that. Next Anonymous, how do you balance billable hours versus giving back? or sorry, how do you balance billable hours with giving back?
Well, I'd say from my personal point of view, it's just my encouragement. And I think the team likes to do it, and I see it as a motivational thing. But mostly, most companies I know, they have at least one innovation day a month, so people can contribute or can try out something new. So in my surrounding, that's pretty common. I don't know would you agree?
Yeah, I find that it's the intention of contribute, unless it's actually built into the work that we're doing, which so sometimes in our quarterly goal, in order for us to do a thing we want to do, like I said, we depend on the open source projects we work on. So sometimes a goal is, work on this community documentation. And so that's like a company goal for the quarter or something. If it's not part of that, the best way to actually get it done is to box time out. When you tell people, yeah, you can kind of work on this, you've got you got to do at least 30 billable hours a week and 35, and then you have this slush fund, and then they get sucked into email and like checking out tools. And so if you want people to actually contribute, especially within billable hours, like my company is not a billable hour company, but it's still, time is important, and we're not going to expect people to work a full 40-hour week and then contribute on top of it in our name. So you have to say, here it is, you have 10 hours a week, you have 1 day a month, you can go to DrupalCon and get involved in a contribution day, and you aren't expected to do work during DrupalCon. But again, that's going to depend on the different businesses and where you are with your billable hours, how close you're cutting things to begin with. It's just not always possible on a regular basis. Sometimes it's like, let's make a goal that in July we're gonna have a contribution day or a hack day or something where people can do that. But we can't do it every month, But for us, the best way to do it is it's just incorporated literally into our work. Into our business. It's incorporated into our business goals, right? So that there is a financial business reason for doing the work versus it being an add-on to the company.
Excellent. Okay. So the last question in the Q&A is for each of us. Max wants to know from each of us, what is your favorite technique for getting team members to share their cool work in lightning talks like you mentioned? Sometimes I find no one thinks their work is cool, but it is. Oh, I like that.
A good one.
I can start. I haven't had to answer any questions yet. I think you need to, as with most feedback, positive feedback, you need to be very specific. So you need to identify what is cool about the work and point that out for them, being an external eye, and especially if you're in any kind of a mentor or leadership or management role around the people, it's even more important to, even if it's not for the purpose of a lightning talk, identify what's cool about their work and what makes it very interesting and valuable for other people to hear about it. That's definitely, that's my answer. Mm-hmm. And maybe I'll pick on Lisa next. We haven't heard from you in a while.
Sure. Something that I think is not done enough is helping people who are outside of the engineering org participate in internal hackathons. And I think kind of creating like pathways for folks to get excited about like what others can teach each other, like kind of framing it in a way where you have something like valuable to share with other people in the organization. One of my favorite hackathon projects that I did was a pop-up book about Kubernetes. It was a paper engineering cross team project. So
amazing.
I would try to kind of show things that are maybe a little off the beaten path in those spaces, like invite people in.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. I love that. Steffi, how about you?
Oh, actually, I like to pair up. Like when someone's unsecure, to put out, like to talk to those people and pair them up with someone else, like from a totally different perspective. So you have like, again, marketing and tech. So they presented them together. And so you have the two views and you have the two roles who have their fans in the audience already, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's my workaround.
Fantastic. We'll finish off with you then, Addie. Great.
I don't know if I sound like I'll encourage people to share stuff that's not work related. You know, because we can be kind of quirky and everybody's got their own thing. And it's like, like, why don't you just share something that you think is cool? Even if if your work, you don't think your work is cool, what do you think is cool going on right now? And, that still creates that feeling of sharing and openness and excitement, and can get people more comfortable and maybe thinking about the work that they're doing. Also, I would highly encourage having someone like Joe Schindler on your team, because Joe is like the cheerleader of the company, and he'll be like, I want to hear about this thing you did. Show me. So.
Nice. Fantastic. Thank you all. I've had a blast hanging out and talking with you about leadership and open source, and I hope we get the chance to do it again. And we'll
Thanks
see you.
for organizing this. This was great.
Yay. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a nice con.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Drupal on.